Well, hello, everybody. My name is Michelle Youngman, and I'm the Executive Director of Christian Music Broadcasters. We're so glad you're here with us today. We are fresh on the heels after our CMB University event last week in Nashville, where 60 students, 15 professors, 30 gold members all gathered together really to invest in our future. Great time. We're already starting to plan for CMBU 2020, and we're very excited. The future looks amazing. So anyway, we are glad you're here today. We've got some great things in store for you. But before we dive into our time with Mark Ramsey, I'd like to introduce Andrea Hirth. She is going to join us. Hello, Andrea.
Hi. Hey, everyone. Hope you are having a happy Wednesday. And can we even believe that literally November is nearly half over, which is crazy, which means Thanksgiving is soon. But I think the hardest thing to believe is that 2020 is literally 7 weeks from today. So 7 weeks from today, we're going to be in 2020, which is crazy, which most of you know, then that means if you are a 2019 CMB gold or silver member, that your memberships will be expiring in, I guess that would be 6 weeks and 6 days from today on December 31st. But hopefully you've seen our emails and to our website to see that we have launched our 2020 memberships. We're super excited about, we're excited every year about our memberships, but we've been working really hard to confirm some really great benefits for our members in 2020. We're excited again to be partnering with MediaBase. We've heard from you all that is a member benefit that you guys all are taking advantage of, and we're super happy for that. New this year, introducing CMB mentoring with Alan Mason, and as a 20th member, you will be getting a 20% discount, and the list goes on. There's so much more. I could talk about it this entire hour, but make sure you visit our website, cmbonline.org, and you can learn about all the amazing benefits. I will let you know, 2020 silver memberships will be $199, and you get discounted registrations to all of our events, Momentum, the Momentum Summits. Gold memberships are $1159, and they include complimentary registrations to all of our events, and we also offer 2 gold exclusive events. One of those that we just got back from the Gold Member Retreat. We just spent some time in Nashville with Ian Morgan Cron talking about the Enneagram, learning more about ourselves, just as people and as leaders. And it was an incredible time. So if you don't know about the Enneagram, I would 100% encourage you to go take the test, find out more about it, because it's really great. But also, as a gold member, you are able to come to the Gold Member Gathering in the spring. And in 2020, we're super excited that we'll be traveling to St. Louis on March 5th and spending some time with Tim Miles. So that's going to be great. So make sure you get your gold memberships, your silver memberships, and join us for all these fun events. One last thing I want to mention is Momentum 2020. We are working hard on that right now as well too. Registration for Momentum will launch on January 6th with our one-day early bird sale. So this one-day sale is going to be the absolute cheapest rate for Momentum. So mark your calendars, January 6th. More information will be coming your way soon, so be looking out for that. So anyways, that's all for me. I hope you guys will join us again next year as a 2020 member. And as always, please feel free to reach out to me with any questions, Andrea@cmbonline.org. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrea. And here to share a little bit more of Momentum and some of our events is Brittany Watley, our events manager. Hello, Brittany.
Hi, Merry Christmas, everyone. Feels like Christmas here in Florida because it's freezing cold. And by freezing cold, I mean in the 50s. Okay, so if you haven't heard about our new dates for Momentum, where have you been? Because we're super excited to tell you that we have new dates. You ready for it? May 27th through the 29th. We're going to be back at the Lowe's Royal Pacific Convention Center at Universal Orlando, and we are pumped. Now, let me tell you, this decision did not come lightly. There were so many factors. And if you haven't heard the news, you're probably like, why not this? Why not that? Well, guess what? We have an FAQ page just for those questions so you can realize what all the background of information that we had to do in order to make this decision. So you can check that out. Like Andrea mentioned, everything's on our website, cmbonline.org. If you go to the Momentum page, there's a big, huge FAQ area. But overall, we're super excited. A lot of people have been asking, okay, since you're moving Momentum from September to May, what does that mean for the other events? Well, we're still working on a few, but hot off the press, we can officially tell you that we have our first set of summit dates. So get ready. July 16th and 17th, we're going to Charlotte, North Carolina at Elevation Church. We're going to be talking about music and programming for one of those days and the future of radio part 2 for the second day. So we would love to see you there in July. You have time. Go ahead and get all that approved. Mark your calendars. Get ready to go because we are looking forward to seeing you in July. And as soon as we get on our next set of summits that'll be happening in November, we will definitely let you know that as well. But for now, I think that's all I have. We are excited about seeing you sooner rather than later with Momentum happening in May. And yeah, we'll see you soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Britt. And real soon, we'll be able to share with you guys what our speaker lineup looks like because we're right now in the middle of trying to confirm all of our speakers, including Mark Ramsey. Mark Ramsey has been a part of CMB for such a long time, and we are grateful to him for his sponsorship of our webinars. He's been our main sponsor this year, being able to support us to be able to offer these to you as our constituents. And so we're so grateful. If you've not at his website, it's mrmchristian.com. If any newsletter that's out there, what he does is deliver incredible content to you through his Faith Bright newsletter that's really relevant for Christian radio. I mean, he is in the thick of it. He's doing so much with so many stations, not only in the Christian space, but all over. And so he is able to take that information and deliver it to Christian radio so that as our goal at Christian Music Broadcasters is to help you in radio reach 50 million listeners. And so the content that he provides is really just helping us take one step closer to that 50 million listenership. So grateful for Mark and his dedication to Christian Music Radio. And we're so glad that today he's joining us for our webinar. So I know you guys are here for him. I'm going to turn it over to Mark. Mark, oh my goodness, look at you. You are ready for Christmas. Is it
Sorry, I was just putting up my tree.
Is it cold there? Is it cold in San Diego?
No, it's not that cold. I just have the tree up because it's that time of the year. So I thought it would amuse you guys. Here, I'll turn off the lights to save it when the actual Christmas season comes in a few minutes.
Awesome. So, well, welcome. We're glad you're here.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for making me a part of this. You want me to roll right into it, Michelle?
You go for it. Yes, go for it.
Okay. Let me make sure I've got everything going. So first of all, I'm so thrilled to be a part of this organization and party to what you guys are doing. I just think it's so amazing. I am so proud to be associated with you guys, and I'm so really excited for the stuff that you do. Like you said, Michelle, I do a lot of work for a lot of people in a lot of corners of broadcasting. I really can't think of an organization that does a better job of servicing the needs of its constituency in this space than CMB. So to you, and thanks for allowing me this opportunity to do a presentation. Originally, we were going to do the presentation. I was going to do it at Momentum. And then you rescheduled Momentum. I'm so glad you did. So now I cooked up something else because some things have been kind of on my mind. And I wanted to kind of share with you some thoughts because I think some people don't understand some things that matter. And I wanted to take this opportunity to kind of walk you through this presentation that I created that I've titled, Tell Me a Story. Now, I know all of you, or most of you anyway, are familiar with the Donald Miller story brand stuff. Very useful metaphor, very useful process. I know a lot of Christian broadcasters have gone through it. A lot of others have gone through it, obviously. This is going to be different from that. If this is an alternative to that, or that this is right and that is wrong, or vice versa, it's more that story brand, there are two key components to story brand. One is story, but the other is brand. And brands are not the only people capable of telling stories. And I think when it comes to Christian broadcasters, and more importantly, your audiences, the real benefit isn't the story the brand tells. The real benefit is the story the audience tells and the story the talent tells. So consider it this way. There are really three sources of stories on your air, in your market, for your audience. One is your brand, right? The story brand network, the story brand metaphor, and all the stuff you cooked up with Donald Miller. Second is your talent, the people who get on the air and share stories day in and day out. And the third is the audience. Those people also tell stories. And in fact, as we all know, we solicit their stories. Share your stories, share your stories. I see that on most of the websites in the format right now. But what's disturbed me is I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what a story is, how it functions, and how you can make the most of it. So that's what I wanted to do this presentation for today. So this is not about the brand story. This is about the talent, the stories the talent tells, and the stories the audience tells, and how to make those as effective as you possibly can. Okay, so the first question you might ask is, well, why the heck are you getting this from me? Aren't you the guy who does the research for our stations? And the answer is yes. I'm really, really pleased to be the person who does research for your stations. A lot of stations. I think I probably end up doing more research for more Christian broadcasters than any other research company there is. But an interesting thing happened a couple of years ago that expanded my portfolio beyond the research space. And that is this zone of podcasting, which, as we all know, has really exploded over the past 2 or 3 years. The list you're looking at are the podcasts that I have written, produced, created, narrated, hosted, something over the past 2 or 3 years, not including the stuff that's in development right now. And the most of these shows have spent some time at least at the top of the at the podcast charts in the top 10. I think Jaws got to number 2. Star Wars, I think, got to, I don't know, 3 or 4. I forget. Right now, the Undercovers, which is about undercover DEA agents, hosted by Ed O'Neill. That one's out there right now to listen to. Pops is about Louis Armstrong. That one was a thrill. So anyway, I have this experience now, this portfolio of experience creating these podcasts, and I've learned some things in that process. And I thought some of those things would be useful to share with you. By no means do I know everything I need to know about this space. By no means do I know everything there is to know about story making. But I thought it would be really useful for you to get the benefit of some of the things that I picked up along the way. So again, just to establish why me. There's me with Reno Wilson, the guy from Mike and Molly and Good Girls, who was who was Louis Armstrong in Pops. There's Ed O'Neill. You know Ed O'Neill in the center of the room, and much of the cast and crew for The Undercovers, which is available on your local podcast app right now. And this is one that's in development right now called Aftershock. That's a fully scripted show. That's me in the center. That's Sarah Wayne Callies. You recognize her from Walking Dead. That's some guy from Stranger Things. I can't remember what the heck his name is. Maybe you've heard of him. Anyway, so there we were working on this first episode for this thing called Aftershock, which is going to come out next year, which I'm only producing. I'm not writing, but it's incredibly exciting. And this is one I just finished reading yesterday. I can't believe it. It's called Devil Inside. It's a 6-part limited series podcast that my amazing sound designer, Jeff Schmidt, my collaborator, Jeff Schmidt, is reading it right next to the agent. Then it shops next week. So this is all stuff you will have heard about. Also next year, we're going to be starting on this thing called The Last Stone, which is a true crime. Mark Bowden, who is the author of Black Hawk Down. So this is the world that I'm in addition to research. I just wanted to illustrate this to you to give you some sense that, you know, while I don't know everything I'm talking about, maybe I know a little bit. So anyway, let's dig in. Let me begin with, why are we even talking about story making, storytelling, story? Why? Well, these are the things that stories do that other things don't do. They inspire, they capture interest, they move people to action, they're memorable, they entertain, they educate. You just can't get, you know, they always say that if you go into the old caves in France, right, where the Cro-Magnons painted with berries on the wall, what it depicts aren't just pictures, but actual stories. So storytelling is as old as humankind. What is a story? This is where people get fouled up, folks. So bear with me here. I want to discuss for you, this is the biggest mistake people make, the difference between an anecdote and a story. What is an anecdote? What is a story? Here's the way that I kind of lay out the difference. An anecdote is something, story is a structure that makes it memorable. The key word there, the difference between an anecdote and a story is that you remember the story. I heard some talking about the Addams Family movie, not the new one, but the older Raul Julia one. And someone said, well, yeah, they made a movie about this, a big production, big thing. And the other guy said, well, what was it about? And he said, I don't remember. Well, if you don't remember, it essentially doesn't exist. And that's true of us all, right? If you don't remember me, I don't exist. So being memorable is really important. And that's the difference between anecdote and story. And I'll give you some examples of that. All right. A story is the struggle to get what the hero wants, the struggle of the hero to get what he or she wants. That's the essential, boiled down, thumbnail, high concept of what a story is. It begins with this question: who's your hero? Now, if you're doing Donald Miller Story Brand, the hero is, well, not the hero, but the guide, right? The guide is the Obi-Wan is your brand. I'm not talking about Obi-Wans here. I'm talking about heroes. And the hero of a story told by your talent, told by your audience, is your talent or your audience. It's me, right? It's me. It's the person who tells the story. I'm the hero of the story. Your brand is not the hero of the story. There's a lot of confusion on this because when you ask listeners, and I'm going to show you some examples, to share stories, they tend to be of the, I was in tough straits and then I listened to K-Love and everything was great variety. Well, who's the hero in that story? K-Love. That's not who the hero should be. We should be the hero. If we want people to relate to our stories, they need to relate to the hero of the story. And a hero is not four walls and a bunch of air talent. A hero is a person, one person. All right, what are the characteristics of the story? Let's go through some of these. Again, we get these things wrong. A story is detailed. There's nothing vague about a story. When someone says, I went through a really hard time and then I came out of it thanks to K-Love. Well, wait a minute. There's no detail there. The magic of the story is in the details of the story. Without details, I don't even know what you're talking about. Details and color are everything, right? Here's a weak version of a story compared to a strong of a story. Hero. The hero the hero wants to get rid of arthritis. That's the weak version. Here's the strong version. The hero wants to be able to walk his daughter down the aisle without crippling pain. You can see the difference. The difference is in the detail that's provided, and that's what makes it a more compelling story. We tend to skip to the headlines, and that's a mistake, and it's because we're in this radio zone where we think we've got 7 seconds to make our point. If you have 7 seconds to tell a story, don't tell a story, okay? You can't do it in 7 seconds. A story is also vivid. Those colors I just shared with you from that little story about the wedding, those are vivid colors. I'm using dramatic language. I'm using things that you can see and feel and taste and smell, right? Vivid. A story is not about you, right? A story is not about you. A story is about the hero. Now, if it's an air talent telling a story about themselves and their family, clearly it is about them. But if it's a radio station telling a story, it's got to be about the listener, about the hero. It's not about you. Otherwise, it's called a testimonial. What do you call a story about you, the radio station? The answer is a testimonial, right? And there's nothing wrong with testimonials, but testimonials are not stories. Testimonials are of the following nature. K-Love is great because, KSBJ is great because. That's not a story, that's a testimonial. Those are fine as far as they go, but they're not the same thing and they lack all the powerful components of a story. A story is emotional. We tend to be afraid of emotion. When I did the Inside Jaws, Inside Star Wars, all those various series, I was very deliberate in making sure that there was an emotional component in there to grab people, to leave something behind with them after they've learned all the trivia about Star Wars, about Jaws, about whatever. That was really the intention. That was why it was worth doing. And that was why I hope it was worth listening to. So don't be afraid. People are always afraid of this, by the way. Don't be afraid to use this. One of the things that popped up in my feed today is that thing from Jeopardy yesterday, where I guess one of the contestants used his opportunity to put the answer on for the question, I guess, what is, and he didn't know the question. So he said, what is "We Love You, Alex"? Alex, of course, is going through a tough time with cancer right now. And it just broke everybody down because it was emotional and it's memorable. And those two things go hand in hand. He lost all his money that he had so that he could say that. Emotion comes from conflict. You need to recognize that emotion is not manufactured. That emotion comes because character A is fighting against character B, or character A is fighting against the man, or character A is fighting against, bad health or a bad financial straits, or drugs in the family, or whatever it happens to be. But that conflict is what creates the emotion. A story is not about people, it's about one person. This is really important to remember. Anytime, when we talk about toys for tots, there is no such thing as tots. I don't know tots. I know a tot, but I don't know tots. When you see charitable organizations, you'll see that they tend to use stories of individuals who are affected by the charity. When I did one of the series that we did was for Coke. It was a branded content piece for Coke for Red. And it was all about efforts to stop AIDS in Africa. And it was in celebration of the 20th anniversary of the movie Philadelphia. We specifically pulled out stories of individuals and dramatized and illustrated those stories of people in Africa who were battling this, huge problem of AIDS and what it meant to them to have the solution available to them. But I used individuals. I didn't make generalities. I didn't say people do this. I didn't say Christians do this. I didn't say people in St. Louis do this. I used a specific individual. That's what's wrong with Toys for Tots. That's what's wrong with all of the charitable things we do that are designed to benefit a lot of people. That's great. But when we storify those things, when we turn those things into stories, we got to make them specific and about one person. A story has a point. Sometimes it's forgotten. When you ever heard somebody ramble, how compelling is that? I don't even know what they're talking about, right? I mean, it has to have a point. You have to have a destination, and the destination should be baked in from the beginning. You should know where you're going before you set out on the path. Otherwise, you won't know when you get there, and no one else will either. This is something that would be new to you. A story should contain survival information. What do I mean by that? Survival information is stuff that helps you live in the world, right? Stuff that helps me be a better person, stuff that helps me be a better parent, a better father, a better mother, a better daughter, survive strife, survive addiction, survive alcoholism, whatever it happens to be, stuff that helps me survive, right? There must be some value in that. What is the lesson, in other words, of this story, of this movie, of this podcast? What is supposed to take away from this? Is it just entertaining? Is it just informative? Or have you left me with something I can chew on and I can live by? That is the most mature form of story. And that's something we should always aspire to. As an example, what's the survival information in Wizard of Oz? Well, a lot of you are probably thinking, well, it's, there's no place like home. Not really. The survival information is that everything Dorothy needed to go over the rainbow was right there with her all along. The rainbow was there and she didn't see it. That's the survival information. Everything you want is there for you if you recognize you can get it yourself. That's an important piece of survival information, and that's just one example. So let me talk structure for a bit. The elements of story, really important. You have a hero, you have an obstacle or obstacles, and you have a goal. If you don't have these three things, you do not have a story. A story is about a hero, battling obstacles in order to achieve a goal, period. For example, the person we empathize with is the hero. The obstacle are the things that are keeping her from the goal, and the goal is what she wants. If you're telling a story on the air and you don't have these three things wrapped up in it, that's an anecdote, my friends. Here's what I did for instance Star Wars. The hero obviously was George Lucas in that story. The obstacle was, the studio was making his job impossible, making it almost impossible for him to get the movie made against all odds. And his goal was making this weird, unlikely hit of a movie called Star Wars. And he did it. So the structure looks like this. Once upon a time there was, that's before, and then every day where things are going along, and then all of a sudden something happens, right? There's this trigger. There's this thing that happens. And because of that, certain things happen. There's fighting, there's obstacles, there's battling. Because of that, certain other things happen until finally you have a climax and a resolution. That's what a story looks like. And if your story doesn't look like that, you don't have a story. So here are ways to put that in pithier language. You have the setup, the crisis, the pursuit, conflict, climax, and aftermath, okay? 6 steps. I'm going to give you some examples of this in a minute. The setup, how everyday life looked before the crisis. The crisis is that awful thing that happened, and the thing that forces the hero to take some steps to resolve the crisis. The pursuit is what happens then. What are the steps the hero takes in order to overcome the obstacles? The conflict, the storm and drang that happens on the way to that goal, right? The climax, this is where it all comes down to the moment of truth. And then the aftermath, the new life the hero has afterwards, why it was all worthwhile, right? Those are the 6 steps. So I want to give you an example. This is an example from something that we didn't end up getting this, but a couple of years ago we pitched the Ellen Show on some podcast stuff. And one of the things we did was called Ellen's Good News, it was called. And the idea was every day there's another little tidbit from Ellen, which is one good news piece of the day. So first I want to share with you the anecdote version of what we presented, and then follow it with the actual story version. The anecdote is what you might hear in a headline. It's what you might hear if someone were telling the story on the air. It's what you might hear if the worst storytellers of all, the listeners, told the story. Here's the anecdote. Let's see, let me move my picture out of the way. During the Las Vegas outdoor shooting in 2017, 2 of the injured were later married. There's the anecdote, okay? You'll forget 2 seconds. Now I want to walk you through the story version. This is an actual story that we wrote based on this true thing for this feature. And I'm going to put it using those 6 steps so you can see how it plays out. 22-year-old Mackenzie Lane, notice I'm using details, and 21-year-old Brandon Helmick were as they watched the big outdoor country music show in Las Vegas last October. That's when they heard the gunshots ring out. This was the Vegas shooting that left 58 dead and more than 800 injured. Okay, that's the setup, which brings you right into the crisis. That's when they heard the gunshots ring out. This was the Vegas shoot. Whoops, I'm sorry. This is the crisis I had at the bottom of the previous picture as well. Pursuit and conflict. What happened next? Instinctively, Brandon pushed his girlfriend to the ground and covered her body with his own. Amid the chaos, there was a break in the gunfire. Brandon held on to Mackenzie and they ran to some storage units for cover. During the confusion, Mackenzie was hit, a shot in the ankle. She couldn't walk, so Brandon threw her on his back and carried her until they found an ambulance. The ambulance was full of people with more serious injuries, so Brandon flagged down an Uber driver who volunteered to take them to the airport. Can you feel the pursuit? Can you feel the conflict? The climax. In time, Mackenzie's ankle healed. She and Brandon have been together for 3 years, and they're both grateful for every single day. So it was with special joy that they strolled down a romantic Southern California beach last month. That's when Brandon bent down on one knee and popped the question. Using a heart filled with rose petals, Mackenzie said yes and cried her eyes out. And the aftermath. Our relationship has always meant the world to me, she said, but when someone sacrifices their life for you, how could you get more reassurance than that? The happy couple plans to tie the knot on August 3rd. Do you see the difference? Do you feel the difference? How many of the stories you tell on the air have that amount of detail and vividness to them? How many follow those steps? How many of the stories you hear from listeners do likewise? Now, a thing about listeners. Listeners are great at testimonials. Nobody's better at testimonials than a listener. But they're just awful at stories. I mean, listeners are just the worst, unless you draw them out. They tend to skip to the end. Guess what? I discovered K-Love and I'm doing great now. That's called spoiler. And spoilers are what ruins stories, okay? When they skip to the end like that. So if you are engaging, if you're an Airtel on engaging listeners to draw out a story from them, you need to ask them a lot of questions. My favorite example on this is Howard Stern. If you listen to Howard Stern do interviews, you will hear over and over and over again, he will say, wait, you're getting ahead of yourself, let's go back. Wait, you're getting ahead of yourself, let's go back, because people always want to speed by those details to get to the end. He brings them back, and that's what makes his skills so great. You have to ask them a lot of questions, right? To make us, the audience, feel as if we are there. You need to create a picture and make us care, okay? It's that level of detail that we're talking about. These stories, you tell me. I pulled this from an actual Christian broadcaster website, story from an actual listener, quote unquote, solicited stories. God bless you all. I've been having a rough time since my brother passed away. I've been so mad at God and just got out of an abusive relationship. I flipped through the stations, came across one song playing, and I felt a peace. What? Okay, testimonial, thumbs up, but this is not a story. If I were interviewing this person, I would say, tell me, first of all, who are you? What's your background? Where were you before all this happened? What was your life like then? Secondly, what is this rough time? What do you mean a rough time? How is this time rough, right? Well, because my brother passed away. Tell me about your brother. What was your brother like? What was wrong with your brother? How did it happen? And what happened to you after that time? What was this rough time? You were mad. Why were you mad? How were you mad? How did that play out? You got out of an abusive relationship. Tell me about that. You know, how did that affect the way you felt? How was it abusive? How did you get out of it? And you flip through stations. What prompted you to go to the stations in the first place? What is it about that song that made you feel the way you feel? How do you feel now? How is it different? What lessons can other people take from it? Do you see where I'm going? None of these questions are asked. This page is from the K-Love website. This is all the section where we're soliciting stories from people. This is 6 on one page, and every single one is a testimonial. Not one of these is an entry. Not one of these is full of details. These are all testimonials, no stories at all. Again, I'm not picking on Caleb. I'm not picking on anybody. The other story was from another broadcaster. I work with Caleb. I'm only trying to say that if you aspire to a story, you can achieve a story. So key takeaways, and then I'm done. Stories are stronger than anecdotes. Once again, I gotta move. My picture's always in the way. Does that ever happen to you? Stories are stronger than anecdotes, even if they're longer. I know what you're thinking. Well, what you're describing, it takes so much more time. I mean, people will listen to the longest story you can summon if it's compelling. In fact, they would rather listen to the longest story you can summon than anything else you do but play their favorite song, period. Draw out stories from listeners. Ask a lot of questions. We don't ask enough questions. Build a powerful story using the rules, the guidelines that I presented to you, as opposed to just settle for an anecdote. Here are all the ingredients all on one page. A hero, detailed, vivid, not about you, emotional, about one person, with a point, with survival information. These elements: setup, crisis, pursuit, conflict, climax, and aftermath. And with that, I thank you.
Mark, great information. I have some questions for you, though. Are you ready?
Yes.
I don't think you said anything was off limits, so.
Okay.
Okay, first question is, you said you can't do a story in 7 seconds, so what is the perfect length for a story?
There is no perfect length for a story. The perfect length, that's like saying, you know, there are cases where stories are, you can tell something's being, like, you ever watch a TV show and you say, you know what, this is like too long. Or even a movie for that matter, and say, you know what, I think It Chapter 2 could have been 2 hours instead of almost 3 hours. I think that's possible. So there's no right length. The issue is, are you hitting all the buttons? I mean, there's this famous a quote from Hemingway, right? Of the what is it? A story in 3 words or 6 words or something like that. And I can't remember the story. It's about shoes, and somebody will remember it on the call. But you can do a story with 6 words, okay? But that's a kind of a gimmick. that's not really something you're going to do on the air. So there's no proper length, but it's not going to be 7 seconds. It's going to be what you need to achieve.
Okay, next question. Storytelling is a skill, and taking this into consideration, what you've shared, are there other ways I can help develop this skill of storytelling?
I'm sorry, I was reading the actual Hemingway story. Thank you from Garrett Michaels. Baby shoes for sale, never used. That's the Hemingway story. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Try and duplicate that. You'll have some trouble. I'm sorry, Michelle. Can you re-ask that?
Yes. The question was, with storytelling being a skill, how can I develop this skill past what you're saying from here?
Practice. You talk to anybody, it's practice. I mean, I've written, just on the podcast side, I've written now probably, I don't know, 7, if you include the one I just finished, 7 podcasts. Is it getting better? I hope so. I'm trying to learn more every time. I've got a bookshelf that's growing with things on it from people who know more than I do about this. There's an amazing podcast and YouTube thing I recommend from somebody I really follow closely, Brian McDonald, called You Are a Storyteller, which is just superb, which I can't recommend enough. Brian is just amazing. And he counsels Pixar and all kinds of other folks like that. But the answer is self-study and practice. And also, I think it's knowing what to model success after, It's like, well, how do you, it's like if you see a great piece of art, you may not be able to duplicate it, but you at least know what it looks like. So recognize what a good story is, and then say to yourself, am I moving down the path of making one? Or am I settling for an anecdote?
Where is the best place to get listener stories?
I'm not sure if that means a location in the world, or I'm not sure what that means exactly. Where's the best place? Do you mean like, where do I gather them from listeners? Is that what you mean? I would say the best place to get listeners, if you're saying, let's cut to the chase. If you're saying, how do I collect a great listener story? Then the answer is asking a lot of questions. So I think the idea that listeners will sit in their, bedroom and start tapping into their iPad, the perfect listener story, that ain't going to happen. Okay. And if you go out there with a microphone and say, hey, what's great about Station X? They're going to give you an anecdote. I think it requires questions. So if you have someone who has the makings of a story and you have them on air, do what the great interviewers do. Ask them a lot of questions. Like that story I shared with you from the one radio station, and I had about 50 questions that I would have asked that person. Ask those questions. You can ask a subset of those questions, but a story's not worth spending a couple minutes on. It's not worth anything.
Okay, this last question is from me because I think everybody needs to know. Can you give us a snapshot of what Momentum 2020 Mark Ramsey presentation is going to look like?
Well, we talked to, we wanted to get a sense of what the members saw as their opportunity, the kind of a self-assessment of the members. We wanted to get a sense from the members of what they saw as kind of the strengths and weaknesses going forward, what they saw as opportunities. And I wanted to see, rather than me do research among consumers and say, hey, consumers, what are the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities for Christian radio? I wanted to hear from the members, because I think although we all talk to each other, we don't talk to each other en masse, right? We don't talk to each other in quantity. And I really wanted to know what is the heartbeat of the members? What are the members thinking about the space, the format, the radio industry, running their stations, the future? What are they afraid of? What are their fears? What are the things they're worrying about? What do they lose sleep at night over? And I want to kind of pool all that in one presentation so that we could all see what we have in common, so that we could all see what the problems really are, and so that we could maybe even assess whether some of the things we're spending a lot of time worrying about, we shouldn't be worrying about.
It's going to be amazing. Seriously, I can't wait. On the main stage, you're also going to do a breakout so that people can ask you questions, because I think that's going to be a deeper dive that is going to be so beneficial to our attendees. So we're really excited. Thank you for being flexible and not letting
My pleasure.
get in the way so that we can move on to 2020 with
Pens for everybody.
you.
Pens for everybody. I love these pens.
They're legit pins. Thank you for your time today. Next monthly webinar is going to be on December 11th. So everybody make plans to join us noon Central Time, December 11th. In the meantime, I guess we'd have to say happy Thanksgiving, which is so crazy, but happy Thanksgiving. Blessings to everyone, and we will see you next time. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.